His name was Daniel Ruiz, a quiet single father who had worked at West Ridge High for nearly 14 years. To most, he was the man who emptied trash bins, polished floors, and nodded politely as students hurried past. Few people knew his story. Even fewer had ever imagined it was anything more than ordinary, but today wasn't about him. Today, his son Mateo was graduating, a ceremony full of pride and secrets. Families gathered on the football field, cameras clicking, laughter rising, pride thick in the air. Daniel arrived early, taking a seat far off to the side where he wouldn't block anyone's view. He still wore his janitor's uniform. He hadn't owned a suit in years. And though several teachers waved kindly, he kept his eyes on the stage. He didn't want attention. He only wanted to see his son cross that stage, diploma in hand, becoming the first Ruiz to graduate high school. While Daniel sat quietly, a group of dignitaries arrived at the ceremony. Among them was Admiral Thomas Harrington, a decorated U.S. Navy officer and the event's guest speaker. The school had pulled every string to get him. He was a man of legend, rumored to have led classified operations, known for sharp instincts and an iron memory. As the admiral and the principal walked past the seating rows, Daniel shifted in his chair. His sleeve slid up slightly, exposing the faded ink of a tattoo just above his wrist. A simple symbol, barely noticeable. But Admiral Harrington noticed, and he stopped dead in his tracks. The tattoo that stopped an admiral. Where did you get that tattoo? The admiral asked sharply. Daniel froze, pulling his sleeve down as if burned. Sir, I'm just here for my sons. That symbol, Harrington insisted. It belongs to the Ghost Tide unit. That unit doesn't just give out tattoos. You either served with them or you died for them. A murmur rippled through nearby parents who overheard. Daniel closed his eyes. He had hoped no one would ever bring it up again. The principal looked confused. Admiral, he's one of our janitors. The admiral didn't look away. He's more than that. I'd like to hear his story, if he's willing. Daniel's throat tightened. Memories he'd spent years burying surged back. The missions, the losses, the impossible choices, the night that had ended everything. He hadn't told Mateo because he didn't want his son to carry the weight of what he had done and what he couldn't undo. I'm no hero, Daniel finally whispered, just a father trying to do right. The admiral's voice softened. Son, we don't hide tattoos like that unless we're protecting someone or ourselves. The past he tried to outrun. Daniel took a long breath. He told them about the unit, an elite, unspoken fleet that handled missions too dangerous for headlines. He spoke of a rescue mission gone wrong, how he had disobeyed an order to save his team, and how the choice cost the lives of others he couldn't reach in time. The guilt had been unbearable. He left the Navy, withdrew from friends, and poured himself into raising his infant son alone after losing Mateo's mother during childbirth. I traded ships for school hallways, he said quietly, because at least here the only battles are spilled soda and broken lockers. The parents around him were silent. Even the admiral's stern face had softened with respect. Ruiz, Harrington said, you didn't run from anything. You gave everything you had, and then you gave even more for your son. A moment that shifted the entire ceremony when the graduates finally began walking across the stage. The admiral stepped up to speak. But before delivering his prepared speech, he paused and looked toward Daniel. Today, we celebrate not just the students, he said, voice carrying across the field, but the quiet heroes who shaped them. Some heroes don't stand on stages. They sweep the floors beneath them. Some don't wear uniforms. They wear overalls, and some, without asking for any recognition, carry the scars of service that the world will never see. He gestured toward Daniel. Nearly all heads turned. And today, Harrington continued, I want to honor one such man. Mr. Daniel Ruiz, thank you for protecting this nation long before you protected these hallways. Daniel shook his head, overwhelmed. But before he could say anything, the crowd began to applaud. Then Mateo, tall, nervous, wearing his graduation gown, stepped off the stage, crossed the field, and wrapped his arms around his father. "Dad," he whispered, eyes shining, "why didn't you ever tell me?" "Because," Daniel said, voice cracking, "your future mattered more than my past." The challenges behind the quiet life on the walk home that evening, Mateo asked about everything. The missions, the fears, the reasons his dad spent years avoiding attention. Daniel told him about the nights he could barely sleep, terrified his past would make him a bad father, the years balancing 2 jobs just to afford rent and keep food on the table, the loneliness of choosing a quiet life instead of returning to a career he loved, the guilt that followed him everywhere even though he'd been cleared of wrongdoing. But he also told him about victories, watching Mateo take his first steps, teaching him honesty, work ethic, and compassion, cutting corners for himself but never for his son, and ultimately choosing hope over regret. Mateo listened, then said something Daniel would never forget. "Dad, you weren't hiding, you were healing, and you still raised me to stand tall." A hero in plain sight. The story spread across the school in the weeks that followed. Students who once hurried past began stopping Daniel in the halls to thank him. Teachers invited him to speak to classes about courage and resilience. The principal offered him a position overseeing campus operations, a promotion with better pay. But what meant most to Daniel was something small, something quiet. One night, he found a note taped to the fridge. It was from Mateo. "Everything I become, I owe to you." Daniel stood there for a long time holding that note, realizing something he'd never allowed himself to believe. He had spent years thinking he was a broken man hiding in plain sight. But he wasn't hiding, he was raising. He wasn't broken, he was building. He wasn't just a janitor. He was a father, a protector, and a survivor. A hero, not because of the tattoo on his wrist or the missions he completed, but because of the boy he had raised against all odds. Final message: real heroes don't seek applause. They show up day after day, even when no one's watching. They carry their burdens quietly, choosing love over pride, sacrifice over recognition. And sometimes the strongest people are the ones we pass by without noticing. Until one moment, one glance reminds us that greatness often lives in the most ordinary places, just waiting to be seen.